Hi, good morning. Welcome aboard. My name's Russ Turner from the Training Institute at People Incorporated, and this training this morning is environmental assessments. So I'm going to do a little housekeeping, and then we'll get started. I'm happy that you were able to join this morning. We are going to be on for 90 minutes. We'll probably do a little break about halfway for a few minutes for a stretch. We are recording, FYI. The session may be posted later by the Department of Human Services. We will discuss a little bit topics related to mental health and trauma, so be aware of that. This is a safety training essentially, but I want to invite you to use a trauma lens as we think about the topic. So I'll walk you through that. And then this is who we are. So this is my company. Like I said, I'm from People Incorporated, which is a large community-based mental health provider in the state of Minnesota. And I'm the director of training at the Institute, which is our training arm. We train our staff, but we also train organizations. So we do external projects with different types of groups all the time, bringing, best practices from mental and behavioral health out into the community in different types of organizations. And basically we do three categories, plus our children's stuff, which is what you're doing now. And so what's happened here is we have been asked by DHS to make this training series, and we're delighted to do it. So thanks for having us do that and for logging on. We have a co-host in the participant list. If you look, you'll see the name Brett Olson. He's our co-host, one of my colleagues, looking after things behind the scenes while I do the presentation. Okay. And then and if you want to communicate, the best way to do it is via the chat. All right, so if you chat in, me and Brett can see your chat. So if you have questions, thoughts or comments, please chat them in and I'll distribute them accordingly. I keep it open right there so I can see what's going on. So love to hear from you. Feel free to chat me a good morning or where you're joining from, or just anything about your situation with regard to the material, with the topic, foster parenting, anything really. We can just say hi. This is me, just a little bit about me, so you know who's talking. So there's really two elements to my biography that I think are interesting here, is that I'm an adoptive father. So I have two adopted children. I like to refer to ourselves as an adoptive family, but they're kind of old now. I have an 18-year-old son and a 15-year-old daughter. And, so it's been an interesting journey of parenting. I think that's relevant here. And then I've been teaching for a long time, been at People Incorporated for 18 years. And my work at People Incorporated is to make sure that our training is in best practices. So that's a phrase that we use in our field to say, what is the current thinking based on the research literature and best clinical practice, at least today, and bring that into different arenas, like parenting. Thanks for the messages coming in saying good morning. I appreciate that. So yeah, he, him pronouns, and a little bit there about my extracurricular life, if you like, outside of work and family. I coach soccer. This training is part of a series. So DHS asked us to create a curriculum based around these 10 areas in this order. And they're all 90 minutes, so that's 15 hours of curriculum. So just so you can see where we're sitting, we're quite near the beginning. We did a session last week on de-escalation. And now we're thinking about the environment that we can create in the home. Not only the home, though, but the immediate surrounding area. So we're going to think not only about the home, but also about, people coming into the home and the backyard and the street and even like going out in the car. So we're trying to we're trying to set it up for success when we are working with and caring for children who have some real challenges. So what can we do to set it up so that we are best placed for a successful outcome? So anyway, that's where we're sitting today. And you can see that we're going to keep going in this direction for quite a little while. Thinking about how to partner with other agencies, some cultural considerations. And then I want you, and I'll mention this at the end, but I want you to think about how you look after yourself. And so I'll introduce later in the series some best practices on self-care and promoting your natural resiliency. All right, so that's where we're at. So this is what we're going to do today. The basic idea is that a caregiver who's proactive about creating the right kind of space in the home is more likely to have fewer issues and more success. Right. So it's a chance to sort of sit back and think, okay, well, I wonder if there are adjustments that I could make that would make my home easier, really, for the child. So lots of practical strategies, and some you'll do, and some you won't do. But it's for you to sort of think about, yeah. And part of it is emotional safety. So we're gonna get into trauma more as the curriculum progresses, but I'll introduce it a little bit here because it's very important to understand a bit about, what's the goal in terms of like how is the child coming into this new environment. All right. So these are our learning objectives. Like I said, the home, adjustments. I'm also going to talk a little bit about structure, routine, schedules, and you'll see a little more of that in the next couple of classes. And then, like I said, outside safety, including the car. So just to remind you that we are recording, and because people are dropping in, if you just joined us, welcome. Use the chat function to send a message to me and Brett anytime. All right. And then, yeah, just to finish the housekeeping, at the end of the session, we take the list and we email within a few days, couple of days. We email you a certificate of completion along with a link for the evaluation. All right. So that's our process. So I wanted to start by mentioning trauma with a view to, the next class we dive pretty deep into trauma. We think about trauma-informed care and attachment and how the attachment process happens in the developing baby's brain and what we can do to improve what might be a insecurely attached child. So we're going to kind of go there, but for today, I want you to just sort of think about these two statements. They're a little bit simplistic, really, but I think they're helpful because a kid who has experienced a lot of trauma, one way to conceptualize that is that there's been a lot of chaos. There's been a huge disruption potentially in their neurodevelopment. And so if we embrace that as a principle, the solution, which is very, very long term, by the way, not short, unfortunately, but part of the solution is to provide structure. As the brain starts to rewire itself, it does so by understanding bit by bit by bit that the some of that chaos is over. It's very, very difficult for a child to forget, and they can't really. But day by day, as they understand that their environment is structured, it's a bit boring, perhaps even. That's kind of good because healing and safety comes from structure and predictability. If you imagine that when a person experiences a traumatic event, it's entirely unpredictable. And so now the brain is somewhat wired to be constantly on the lookout for unpredictable things. So you end up with hypervigilance and related behaviors and symptoms. As a child grows and they, like I say, bit by bit learn that, that unpredictability, it's still there, but it's not quite as primary. I'm starting to feel this, starting to feel safer. Kind of more predictable routines, people, environments. The brain is slowly but surely rewiring itself. So the work that you're doing, although it feels sometimes, some days, I would suspect, like nothing really works or nothing really helps, actually is working. So keep that principle in mind as a kind of lens for what we're doing here. And it will be helpful because children with a lot of trauma or have experienced a lot of trauma, or the way it's spoken about today is who have a lived experience of trauma. They can seem very reactive. They can seem very like almost hyper reactive to situations. Like if your child seems to overreact, that's a clue that it might be a kind of a trauma response. So for now, that's all I'm going to say about that with the view to like the next class goes deep there. But just keep it in mind because as we set up our environment, um, that's really the goal, that it just feels predictable, safe, routines, a little bit boring, as a good thing. All right, so let's talk about the home itself first. So obviously, I think we want to consider physical safety. Uh, so some of the classic areas to take a look around your house uh, is electricity. And I mean, it depends a little bit, I suppose, how young your child is. But a good practice would be to cover electrical outlets. It's pretty good practice anyway. You know, if you don't want things going into electrical outlets, particularly water. So to keep them covered is a good practice. The younger the child, the more important that is. And if you have pets, that's another element there. Um, and a big one is anything related to fire. So you want to be careful what's lying. I mean, a big thing is if you just look around the home, what's just lying around, you know? Um, I'm sure if I went around my house, I'd find a lot of things lying around. Um, lighters, burners, um, and be mindful of any materials that are hot enough to burn a child. Pots, pans, you want to keep them out of a child's reach. The kitchen is potentially an extraordinarily dangerous room. So that would be one area to sort of have a look at. Because most electrical outlets are down on the ground, which is where young children are. Take a look at long wires, cords that could be tripping hazard, and so get the cords organized and tucked away nicely. That's a good practice. Um, things like keys, locks. Can you do you know where the keys are? Like, could a child grab them, lock them inside a room, lock you out, things like that in a moment of panic or great angst. A traumatized child might do that, which would be fairly traumatic for everybody. But you might want to think about how would you get back in the house if you were locked out? Could a child lock themselves somewhere? You want to not have that capacity. I know sometimes, like bedroom doors, they're locked. So there's a lock on the door to this little bedroom that I'm in, the back of my house. I didn't put it there. It's just part of the door. So you want to pay attention to that, but you don't really want situations where kids can lock themselves anywhere. Alarm systems are good. Obviously, you want to look at your smoke alarms, keep them up to date. What I did, and this worked well for me, is when one alarm started chirping in my house, I just changed all the batteries and then marked the calendar for 1 year later and then just did it again because I do not like that chirping. That is annoying, but that keeps them all powered up and good to go. If you don't have an outside alarm system, remember that people are deterred by the presence of things that look like you have an alarm system. So you can buy stickers that are fake, put them on your windows. You can buy fake cameras that they're not doing anything, but they look like they are. It's worth thinking about. Um, they're not expensive and they do look pretty legit. Windows and doors. Now windows, um, you can install a window stop so that a window doesn't open more than 4 inches. That allows for you to block entry and exit by whoever. That's a good system. It's simple and effective. And then another really big area is just water. Water is a lot of fun for young kids. Any parent will tell you that. But it's also kind of dangerous. There's the link to electricity. Um, and the bath is a drowning hazard. So be careful with the bathroom. There's no designated age for safely allowing a child to bathe alone. Kids' abilities to, be in water really vary. But I would err on the side of caution when you assess whether or not a child is old enough to be left alone in a bathtub and certainly a pool. I think the conventional wisdom is that you can drown in a couple of inches of water, which is hard to believe, but experts who know more about it say that. So a big one with the child coming in to the home is just the dangerous items. And it's kind of a long list, this. I would I would to save time, I would focus on the kitchen and the laundry room. These are prime spots for sort of like toxic cleaning supplies, hazardous substances like bleach, and like poisons. All right. Your your new foster child who almost certainly has lived experiences of trauma may panic and uh not exercise good judgment around those kind of substances. So you just want them away. And one thing to keep in mind is that sometimes putting things on a high shelf doesn't work well because you can like throw stuff at the shelf and that things will fall down. So it's better to like lock them away, or if you can, completely remove them. Um, so I don't know if you need to like build out a storage space. It's possible. I certainly would be very careful with something like bleach. Which I mean, you can find it in most homes. Um, or you could do secured drawers that are locked, childproof locks. That's good. But keep an eye out for what's in your cleaning supply portfolio. Now, medications. Um, Older children may be pretty used to taking medications and may have a pretty strong knowledge of different types of pharmaceutical um, interventions, different medications, psychiatric and otherwise. And again, a kid who's maybe a little erratic in their decision making, medications would be a very important thing for them to not be able to grab. And not just their meds, but yours. Now, so that's going to be quite a big shift for many people. Mm, it wouldn't be unusual, for example, in a kitchen to be able to find things like Advil and Tylenol, vitamins, but you really want all of that stuff locked away. Um, Same goes for alcohol. It's just funny as I do this, I just kind of keep going. I keep kind of doing a little inventory of my little house. And I must admit, if I had a new child coming in, I'd have to to spend some time really reorganizing and removing certain things. Not alcohol. There isn't any alcohol, but you know, things like the cleaning supplies and the medications, for sure, I'd have to make a better plan. So, I certainly don't want to like sound judgmental. I'm really picturing a very ordinary house here. And when you start thinking about it, it's like full of hazards. And it's really kind of interesting. Uh, Now, if the child's very small, you want to really think about things like just the little small objects, cotton balls, toothpaste lids, disposable heads from shaving razors, just little tiny things like that. And parents will remind you if you ask them that the kids will put like everything in their mouth. I remember this now when my children were much younger, that it's like, my goodness, you seem to put everything in your mouth. They do that. It's part of their development to sort of experience the world through their mouth. It's kind of unbelievable to be honest what they will put in their mouth, but they will. So you have to you have to keep things nice and clean, nice and simple. You really want to strive for a simple, uncluttered environment that's sort of calming. Yeah, it doesn't need to be super exciting. So yeah, I mean, different things to keep in mind. Even things like belts, ropes, firearms, bullets, fairly obvious, but have a strong plan there. And knives too. Knives is tricky because of the kitchen. But I remember removing all of the very sharp knives from my kitchen and then not remembering where they were. So, it's better to spend time looking for them later than to have to deal with the consequences of children getting their hands on them. One tip I picked up that I thought was interesting was if you have an empty bucket, it's useful to turn it over when it's not in use. Otherwise, like things just sort of like drop in there, or you can have chemicals that are just left over somewhat in an empty bucket. So keep things clean and tidy. There's a lot of stuff, isn't there, in a house when you start really doing a mental inventory. Anybody have any items that perhaps I missed? If you do, chat them in. Yeah, choking. I mean, these are the small items. There's just so many all over the place. For many of you, you'll be all over this. You'll be on top of it. For some, there'll be a little adjustment. And I would go room by room, I think. Start in the kitchen, the laundry room, the chemicals out, and kind of go from there. Yeah, medication comes in those child-resistant caps. Uh, they're not that child-resistant to a determined adolescent. So big exclamation point and point of notice on medication. Okay. So keeping going in terms of like I'm sort of going towards like how to run the house. Again, when the child starts getting the vibe that the property and the house is a safe place, even though you might not notice it and it might not happen quickly. Every experience of safety and security and predictability is slowly but surely rewiring the brain in a process that neuroscientists call neuroplasticity. In terms plasticity, meaning it's changing bit by bit. So having good routines around the property sends the right message that yeah, we know how to keep ourselves safe, or at least we know how to make it as safe as possible. And interesting thing there about control. I wanted to mention this. Like these are all things that we can control. Remember, the experience of trauma is an extreme lack of control, right? So when a trauma happens to someone in that moment, they were completely unable to control what's happening. Like if it's a car crash, you lost control. If you're abused by an adult, you can't control that. So control becomes an actual point of like strategy for healing. When a therapist, for just go off on a tiny tangent, but when a therapist works with a client with PTSD, they'll work with them on little things that they can do to control their day, their relationships, their work environment, their communication techniques, little bits of control. They'll give them choices. Do you want to stand up or sit down? Do you want to choose the next time of the appointment? Or shall I do it? Do you want to, like every little choice sends the right message to the brain. It's like, oh, I can control that at least a little bit. And that's good. And you need like thousands and thousands of them over a long period of time for the brain to realize, okay, okay, this is good. That traumatic experience is in the past. It still bothers me, but I can control today. That's kind of the goal. So we can we can start that process by controlling the house a little bit. And I think also teaching what we're doing. We bring the mail in every day because a big stack of mail outside the house is a sign that no one lives there or that they're away. Um, Close the curtains, blinds after dark, open them in the morning, put lights on, turn them off, things like that. And you can explain it. Say, yeah, the reason we do this is because unfortunately, in any neighborhood, there will be some people watching and they're looking for houses to, they're looking for an easy target house. And our house isn't easy because there's people coming and going and we know what we're doing. We have the security camera, even though it might even be fake. Things like that. So lock your windows, lock your doors, keep your garage door closed. And one little security tip is have your neighbors help you. My neighbor texts me when I leave my garage door closed because he can see it. It's in the back, it's in an alley. And sometimes it happens, you know, hey, your garage door's open. Oh, okay. So you can help each other. And then I would explain that too. Say, hey, you know, we know our neighbors and we look out for them and they look out for us. And this is all keeping us safer, um, or as safe as possible. And we can control it. It's good to know your neighbors, who lives in the back, who lives next door, what their names. I mean, an important one for a child would be what would you do if you had an emergency and I wasn't here? Like where do you where and let's just take the cell phone out of it for a minute. Let's just say it doesn't work. It's not charged or the network is down or whatever. Like what would you do? And I say, yeah, well, you know, let's go through that. And so have a safety plan. Like Well, we have a couple of neighbors. They know their names, and you go straight over there. And so hopefully they'll never have to do that, but like they know that there's an option, right? They know that there's a plan, and they know that we've kind of thought it through. That's that part's just as important as the actual plan itself. It's like, oh, there's a plan. There is other help. You can go here, you can go there. Ask this person, tell them that you need help. They'll help you. So we're keeping that trauma lens because if you think, my goodness, Russ, this is these big long lists of things to do are a little bit overwhelming. I'm like, I know. But when you start checking off a lot of them, you're creating a certain kind of vibe, a certain kind of environment that's actually quite calming for the child. And that's what you want. Even if they don't show much in their reaction to it, deep down in what you might call trauma brain, it's like, okay, that's good, that's good, that's good, that's good. Yeah, so if you have the yard, uh, just try not to have tools and stuff out there. That's an open invitation for someone to just pick it up and use it or steal it or use it as a way of trying to get in the house. And I'm particularly bad at that one. Just it's a bit of laziness. Just tools can go back in the garage. Um, and then landscaping. I don't know, like the keeping things fairly neat and tidy just tells someone who's watching, like this is a house where they kind of take care of things. They're probably in and out and busy, and it's probably a house we'll just move on from, and we'll find one that's less looked after, where people aren't really paying much attention. Um, yeah, I just wanted, I have a couple interesting notes here. According to the FBI, 34% of burglars walk in through the front door. It's a remarkable statistic, but worth knowing. People can be pretty brazen. They'll try the front door, and if it's open, they'll just come straight in. So good to know. Another thing burglars really like is sliding doors. So they'll often try the front door, and then if that's locked, they'll go around the back and they'll look for sliding doors. They're very easy to secure with a wooden dowel. It's about as low tech as possible as you possibly can be. And if you just make it hard to get in, they'll probably move on to another house. Oh, another thing about the yard, um, and I had never thought of this, but you might want to check whether any of the plants in your yard are dangerous. Not an area of expertise for me, but it's an interesting question. Um, so you should give away any potentially hazardous house plants. You can make a nice gift for a child-free household. Just give those away. It says light up landscaping. Some of the solar lighting systems are nice and cheap and pretty straightforward. They don't require you to even plug them in. So thinking about home security more globally in terms of like how we act in the home, what kind of routines do we have? I was talking a little bit about a safety plan, right? If in the situation where no one's here or people don't come home, what do you do? Where do you go? Who do you call? What door do you knock on? Other things like that is just your fire escape plan. You want to do that. Make it a fun. experience. Do a little drill. They do it at school, right? So they know that. They do a tornado drill, do a fire drill. The reason they do a drill is because once you've literally walked outside the building, going down hallway X through door C and gather over there, once you've done that, like literally, physically, then the chances that you'll be able to do it in an emergency are much higher. You just go, oh, I just do what I did before. Whereas if you just tell people, listen, if there's an emergency, do this, do this, do this, it's really, really hard to remember because of the panic. So you have to kind of go with a kind of muscle memory. So have that little drill and make it fun and have it be part of the your Sunday, I don't know, and talk about why we do it and teach them a little bit about the brain as you do it. Say, hey, listen, it might seem silly, but we're gonna simulate now a fire and what we would do, and we're gonna do it because then you'll remember better because that's how your brain learns things. You do it a few times, you got it. Fake goodbyes. This is a fun one. It's you're leaving the house. I mean, this isn't particularly for foster parents, really. It's if you're leaving the house and the house is going to be empty when you leave, um, you can kind of turn around and say bye to nobody um, because if someone's watching, they'll probably move on thinking that there's still someone home. All right, beware of dogs. I used to have a big dog for a little while, and now the dogs are very small. I left the beware of dog sign up because I thought, well, that's good. I quite like that. I mean, we do have a dog. It wouldn't do anything but, ask to be pet. But it's about trying to you're just trying to put up just little barriers. You're trying to persuade people, this house, you don't don't bother with this one. Um, oh, I got a good message come in about ice and snow. Um, yeah, the roof, depending on the weather pattern in any particular winter, ice dams can be a real problem. I know a couple of years ago they were terrible, weren't they, in Minnesota because I think it rained. And then it froze, and there was some kind of element to the freeze thaw cycle with rain. And anyway, we ended up with really, really bad ice dams that they're potentially deadly, actually. Um, the way to avoid them is to get the snow off the roof as best you can. It's not very easy and it's not perfect. There are other systems where you have uh, ice melt or a little electric wire in the gutter. Um, but keep an eye on your roof and try and get as much snow off it as possible because if there's tons of snow on the roof, once it starts to melt, the water runs down. And then if it freezes overnight, uh, that's where you get the ice down. So good thought there. And quite tricky to navigate actually may just get a professional to come and get rid of them. I've tried doing it myself, ladder and um, various tools, and it's pretty hard. Um, so other things you can be thinking about is things like your car keys. I remember reading about um, houses in Great Britain, where I'm from originally, they tend to be a lot smaller. And there were situations where people were parking their car in the driveway and leaving their keys just behind the front door. And the key was, it was still very close to the car. So people could start the car basically from the outside, which I don't fully understand actually. But there was an issue there with the car was being parked very close to where the keys were in a drawer or on a hook. Um, Plus they're just easy to find, aren't they? If the keys to the car are on a hook right inside the front door, which is a little bit of a habit, I think, of English people. It just and then the front door is unlocked. It's easy to steal the car, basically. So think about where the car keys are. Maybe you need to put them nearer to you where you sleep. I don't know. Is there a risk that the teenage child might take the car? I'm not sure. That's something to think about. Uh, get your Wi-Fi locked down. Uh, have it only accessed by a passcode. I think I mentioned the smoke and also carbon monoxide detectors. Um, it's worthwhile having a peephole in your front door. So, people can't see through it, but you can see them. See who's at the door. It's not a rule that you have to answer the door. If you have any doubts, don't answer it. And teach the kid that. Say, listen, this is something you can control. You don't know who's coming to the door, but you don't have to answer it. In fact, you probably shouldn't answer it. And we can control that. This is where we live. This is our house. We're safe here. I mentioned firearms before, and it's worth thinking about getting a safe. Um, seems a good investment, that, because then you could lock up a lot of things altogether. Medications, documentation, firearms, etc. So the point is, there's quite a lot you can do here, and the list is quite long. I spent quite a bit of time just surfing around the internet looking for different sites, and there's loads of them. And this was a list of things that was pretty complete list. It's probably not complete, but I'm hoping that here we are. You're 50 minutes in here. I think there are a lot of little things you can do to make that home feel safe and secure. Now, for the actual child, let's start thinking about them as they come into this new environment. You want them to feel like things are as familiar as possible. So one thing is food. Like, what are they like? Do you know? Like, try and find out, what do they already know? And in the beginning, go for consistency. Again, with what you might call trauma brain. Say familiar, consistent, boring, perhaps a little bit. That's going to be good. And then start adding in a little bit of maybe cultural related food. What do they like? Can we go to a different part of town and do a little shopping together and get some different foods, things that match with their culture. If that's a relevant piece, I don't know. But it's a good question, isn't it? And then thinking about allergies, got to know that. More and more kids now have allergies, as you know, so we've got special attention there. And if there's special nutrition needs, But food is so like it's such a fundamental thing, isn't it? Breaking bread together, sharing food, eating together, and making it a nice routine that's predictable and a little bit tasty, hopefully. And using home cooking as a shared experience would be absolutely ideal, to some degree, and then eating together, cleaning up together, and delegating a few tasks, but especially for things like cleanup, and teach the child, yeah, this is how we do it. This is how the house works, right? We sort of delegate out the tasks, they go quicker, we help each other, and that's how we do it. And then we can keep the house in good order and we can help feed each other. It's very, very fundamental idea there of creating the right kind of environment. So I'm curious if anyone's got any tips around this. I mean, the cultural piece is going to be case by case, and it might be an area that you're completely unfamiliar. And all we would ask is that you just open, just be open to learning and maybe learn together. If we'll get into it a little more when we think about culture and equity considerations, but there's going to be people in the community that you can lean on a little bit, kind of cultural brokers, if you like, who can point you in the right direction. Um, and that should be a fun exploration. Um, so the foster child has you, but who else do they have? It'd be nice if they have a plan for their like support people, right? That are not you. Who else is there? Um, School, um, is one important area. Cultural groups is that maybe there's a mentor or coach or someone like that. And again, what you're trying to do with the child, especially as they're getting a little older, is say, hey, listen, sometimes in life you can feel very isolated and it's not a good feeling. Well, I say most people feel a bit fragile and vulnerable when you feel isolated, right? So you don't really want that. So what you want to do is start building a network of people. And you've got us, and you've got, the different providers that help you, and you've got some friends, and then you've got these different supports. I call them supports. And you're going to build a plan. Like, and who can help you with what? What's their role? Um, Again, you're trying to imbue, and you'll just take the tiny bite at it, really, in your role. But you're moving the kid in the right direction. It's like, oh, so I can actually build a circle of support with a bit of help. I could do that. Yeah, that's good. It's a bit more control. And you think about how, like, for someone who's been abused or neglected, the, the people around them haven't done a very good job. And so, to put it mildly, so the natural reaction might be to sort of like get away from people. That makes sense, doesn't it? That's a that's like that's almost like a fight or flight response. We're trying to teach them, well, while that's understandable, long term, you want to kind of build your own network. Um, to completely counter the idea that no, you can't trust anyone. No, they'll hurt you. So I'm curious, maybe you can chat it in. What kind of people you're thinking about right now that could be part of a sort of quote unquote inner circle of support? In some cases, it includes the biological parents, but I don't know the exact situation. And my assumption here is that it likely doesn't, but I don't know. I don't know. One of our classes a bit later in is we go through all the different types of other organizations and agencies that are part of your child's life. So that's very relevant here as we teach the child who does what and what the support system looks like. One of our learners reminds us that as school settings are great places for the sharing of cultural diversity, um, information and learning. Thank you for that. So when the special arrival is coming, there's gonna be adjustments. Generally, you want to declutter. You know, I liked this phrase. I can't remember where I picked it up now. Oh, I guess it was here, adoption.org. Like I said, I'm an adoptive parent, so I've been across adoption related resources for quite a long time, but sort of declutter the past and keep what's needed for the future. Children often have a special toy or a blanket or stuffed animal or something like that. That those things are really important. That they're really, really important. You have to look after those items and help the child look after them. Losing them would be pretty bad. I know that from experience. But generally less is more. We talked about food and nutrition. Our bedtime routine. It might be if the child is very young, you might have to do some adjustment of your own bedtime routine. Which is that can be kind of hard because, some people are morning people, some people are late night people, and evidence suggests, by the way, that that's genetic. So it's very hard to adjust. Maybe you have realized that over the years. But as much as possible, sleep when they sleep, eat together, get ready together, do things together, and start developing routines. And we'll go more into this in other classes. We're going to kind of build a house routine that makes sense, that's predictable, and kind of works. The other note I wanted to make on this inner circle, be a little careful in the first few weeks and months. If there's too many new people kind of coming in and out, it's a bit confusing and it's a bit chaotic potentially. And we want to reduce chaos and increase structure. So just be aware that a lot of new faces could even interrupt bonding. I used the word bonding there. Um, because that's a little bit what's going on. There's a sort of recreation of attachment experience over the next few months. And the child's original attachment experiences might not be great. They use the word insecure in the literature. So if now they're in a new environment where there's lots of people coming and going and coming and going, and they're not quite sure who everybody is, that's a little confusing and potentially chaotic and potentially a little traumatizing. So who is who and who's going to be around is kind of how to think about it. Yeah. So just thinking about who's going to be around, just looking at a message. Well, I'm going to read it. It's a great contribution. It says, teach the child that they'll have a group of support or representative people that they can approach. And obviously it depends on their cognitive level. So there might just be a couple of people, it might be quite a big list. I don't know. My sister has a folder that I put together that has her support teams in it. It's in her backpack. Nice. Yeah. Because when you're when you're like, when you're panicked and you don't know quite what to do, that's when you need to reach for the list, or the reminder card. It's like, especially when you're a child, those are the moments where you just can't remember what to do. So you want to drill, when this happens, do this, to call her, do that, and reiterate that there's a support network around them. So ideally, they have their own space, their own room would be the Western norm. But at least have a space. I mean, most kids around the world do not sleep in their own room. That's a particularly Western idea. And I wanted to mention that for cultural balance, I suppose. I mean, um, that said, a child needs their own little spot, and see the word choose in there. Um, little control over how it looks, how it feels. And the question there is like other things that could be somewhat the same from the last place and what needs to be different. And that's kind of difficult to know, but you could open that conversation up. At least ask. They might not. They might not know what you're talking about, but you can ask. See what you can glean. The main place is the main thing is that they have a little spot that's theirs and it feels safe. And so again, from the adoption literature, I wanted to introduce, we're sort of moving, I hope you can feel it, we're moving from physical safety to psychological safety. The psychological safety that's an interesting bit of terminology, isn't it? It's become prominent in the psychological literature in the last decade or two. And I love this little phrase. It's felt safety. Felt safety. It's a feeling, right? And it's established when adults arrange the environment and adjust their behavior so children can feel in a profound and basic way that they're truly safe in their home and with those adults. In other words, safety isn't just like the doors are locked, although that's a good start. It's a feeling, you know. So things are predictable. They have a feeling that, and this is where our curriculum goes in the next few classes, that, you know, um, when Russ gets home, he's usually kind of the same. It's not like some days he's really crabby, some days he's yelling, some days he's all happy, some days this, because that's not predictable. That doesn't produce a feeling of felt safety because the child doesn't really know what is going to happen later, for example. So you want to have those good routines and be very, very predictable. You're going to regulate yourself and your emotional world so that they can follow you and in a very real sense, sort of co-regulate. Yeah. Oh, when things start going off the rails, try not to get mad, but get curious. This is our trauma-informed like paradigm or way of thinking about things, and we're going to go deeper into this, but something's wrong. Like, what is it? And when people like overreact, In your head, you might think, my goodness, they're overreacting. Well, okay, that's actually a good little moment of realization. So, oh wow, I've noticed something. Well, what is happening? Something might be activating them that I'm not really aware of. So be curious. And you might not find out right away, by the way, which is tough, but that's how it goes. So again, I'm keeping that trauma lens front and center. So the other part of emotional safety is that it's a place where emotional expression is okay. A child can come home from their day activities pretty upset about whatever has happened. Potentially, it should be a kind of safe place to land. And at the very least, let's say a kid has experienced discrimination or racism, something like that during the day, they're likely to be kind of upset about it. They might even blame you. They might blame you if you're the race that corresponds with the person that was, you know, being oppressive to them. Um, but the home is a place where they can maybe vent about that without getting further criticism for doing that. That's tough because you're starting to take on a larger role in terms of like what's happening systemically and what's happening in society. But what I learned as we were being taught all about attachment as adoptive parents is that if the child is like, I heard this a few times, if the child is like not particularly acting out at school, at a place like school, but then being kind of difficult at home, that means that they probably feel safe with you and they're expressing those emotions at home, which is okay. It's good. Um, yeah, so I've got a message asking to sort of keep going and be a little deeper here. Yeah, it's this idea that like if the teenager feels that I'm just going to speak kind of generally here, but if they feel discriminated against or something like that outside in the environment that is maybe the broader community, they're likely to bring that home. And the idea of emotional safety is that it's okay to talk about it. And they might be very upset with things, but you create it's like you put a container around them and say, okay, tell me about it. And don't expect to be able to fix anything or provide solutions. You just listen and let them go. And what happens is uh, the home feels like a safe place for emotional expression. And that's the starting point. You want that because then at least they've got that, right? Is this idea of like, well, I can go home and tell my foster parent what happened and at least and like, at least she doesn't like add to the she doesn't add anymore because she seems to get it, or at least wants to try to get it. She listens, that kind of thing. That's an emotional safe place. Um, kids who grow up in an emotionally sort of insecure place actually grow up having problems with dealing with emotions, which makes sense. Like if you have like someone who grows up in an environment where they hear a lot of like, what are you anxious about? I'll give you something to be anxious about. You know, that's that's a if that happens a lot, the kid learns that emotions aren't good and they keep them inside. They don't know how to express them and they don't know how to deal with them. So they can essentially become an emotionally dysregulated adult, at least potentially, which isn't great. Um, so, a good question to ask is, I would say, listen, I'm glad that you told me this, and it's all right. You can tell me this stuff. I know I don't know how to help you, but if there's something I can do to help you, let me know what it is. Is there something I can do? And often there isn't, but if there might be. So you're that support person. Essentially, you're an ally. Yeah, maybe you want to even use that word. So it's so we're going from physical safety to emotional safety. Yeah, comment from an attendee about internalization. Yeah, of course. Yeah. If internalizing those feelings and experiences, if you don't feel safe uh, explaining or reaching out or just like venting, then it'll be internal. It'll internal. Yeah. Yep. Seeing the same thing. So just as an example, I threw a couple of examples and that they're fairly simple. Well, forgive the simplicity, but child comes home complaining someone's racist to him at school. This would be the kind of thing that would be the most helpful. And they might not want to talk about it, even though they brought it up, which is a little confusing, but there it is. It is difficult to deal with. And they're a young kid that maybe doesn't have a lot of tools. So the main thing is that it was okay that they said it. Okay. Child comes home complaining they're being treated unfairly. Just keep it simple. Validate the idea that what they're feeling is somewhat normal. It's valid, it's emotional, and it sounds like it was really hard. You need help with something. Don't try and fix it and don't try and like talk them out of it. Like, I'm sure it wasn't that unfair. Like, let it be unfair and put the container around that. Well, a child comes home upset about something that happened related to social media. And you get the idea. Just sort of the vibe is like, yeah, well, if you want to talk about it, we could do that for sure. Social media is a tricky one. So I've been kind of getting into this. So I think some of these ideas I've already spoken about, but importance of structure, routines, and schedules, just this idea of trauma versus healing. This is how I opened. This has been a paradigm all through now. And I hope that you're starting to feel it. And you can't just like switch this on tomorrow, but you can make steps towards it, and each and every little step will be helpful, even if it doesn't look like it in the short term. Healthy routines, morning routine. I was speaking about my morning routine the other day with in regard to self-care. But what's your morning routine? Could be useful to be the first one up. That gives you a little calm, quiet time. Outside time is good. I have to walk the dog. So, it's a bit of a chore, quite honestly, but it's actually still a good routine. So routines that are a little bit of work can still be very healthy. So think about your morning routine, your evening routine. Dinner time can be a crucial one. Even if it's not every night, some nights that's a very strong routine. Bedtime with screens off at a certain time. Earlier the better. Do you know that the blue light that comes from screens signals to the brain that it's daylight and it's time to be awake? So reading from an old-fashioned book is better than a tablet in terms of that biology. But get a nice bedtime routine going and give kids chores. Let them know that they're part of the house, they're important, we work together. Basically, the idea is that although some of the chores and the routines can be a bit of a pain, children find it comforting to know that it's like the adults know what they're doing. That might be the way to think of it, actually. Trying to think of the nice, easiest way to think of it. There's very, very strong correlation in the research literature between good outcomes for children who eat eat dinner together with their families. And I think it's not so much the eating. I think it's although that's part of it, it's the routine, it's the structure, it's the connection. It's a good time to just have a little chat, isn't it? Even if it's just for 10 minutes, checking in on the grade on the on the day. By the way, when I say good outcomes, I mean less truancy, better grades, fewer fights, less drug taking, that whole list. Chores, they help add a sense of responsibility, which is good. Maybe they want that. Older kids can have slightly different routines, obviously. Create them together. I think the bedtime is especially important one to take a good look at. There is almost, I'm going to make a comment related to mental health here from the mental health community. There is basically no mental health disorder that isn't made considerably worse by lack of sleep, especially for adolescents. Children need a lot of sleep. The sleep deprived brain, when they put it under, they scan it, it looks very much like an intoxicated brain. So kids can't function properly without good sleep. So get that bedtime routine down, maybe as the beginning of the day and the end of the day, and that'd be a great place to start. It's good for us too. When you feel like life is too busy, perhaps build your routines a little more robustly. Life is quite complex now. It makes us feel scattered. And when we feel scattered, the kids will feel it too. So this predictability idea is it's quite an extensive idea because, and we'll go into this when we think more about problem solving different types of parenting situations in the next 2 or 3 classes after we do the trauma one. It's things like this, how we do things and how we talk to each other, how we resolve a conflict or an argument. We kind of have a way in this house of doing it, and it's not perfect, and not every day is going to go according to the the exact plan, but we have a way of doing it. A lot of it is about how we talk to each other, how do we treat each other. And I think what I've seen is that a lot of kids would just kind of roll their eyes at this stuff, but deep down they like it. They like it because it's consistent. It's predictable. They don't have to wonder about everything. So I want to wrap things up with just a few notes about like let's go outside the home a little bit. Uh, just for the last few minutes here. And I just want to let you know that people who study violence, like Gavin de Becker, will tell you there's many predictable pre-incident signs. So if you're talking with someone who's a stranger and they wish you harm, they often do these things. This is Gavin de Becker's list. I strongly urge you, if this is an area of interest, like who is going to be a person who's going to be a threat to me, to look that name up. Um, there's some interesting clips of him on Oprah. It's going back a few years, but these are these are you know these concepts don't change. I'm just going to put the name in the chat. So that's a good name, but you know what happens often is that and the reason I want to bring these up here is you can start teaching them to your children because if they understand where violence comes from and where it how it looks, they can control it better. But forced teaming is when a person implies they have something in common with you, acting as though they have some sort of shared predicament. They often start talking to you in terms of the pronoun we. We need to do this. We don't need to talk outside. Let's go in. You think, really? We're we're like we're like a team now? Why? What? And they're usually charming, kind, or they act kind. People with antisocial personality disorder are very charming on the outside. This is it's a manipulating strategy. When they tell you stories, they use too many details. The FBI will tell you that too. They look for that when someone's telling a bunch of lies. They usually add loads of details to try to sound more credible. That's an interesting thing to know. Typecasting is when they use a kind of insult to get your attention and get you to sort of come towards them. So they might say something like, "Oh, I bet you would never. I bet you're too good to talk to a, stupid old guy like me." They typecast themselves so that you feel sorry for them, and you want to prove them wrong, that you don't think they're stupid. So now you're talking to them when you really didn't want them to. And loan sharking is they give you help that you didn't ask for, because we tend to reciprocate. We sort of somewhat can't help it. So if I give you something, then you want to give me something back. So they lend you things and give you things. And then they use the word promise. And you should always look out for that. If they say something like, after you do this thing for me, I promise I'll leave you alone. That's a huge red flag. Why are they making a promise? It usually means the exact opposite. And then discounting the word no. And there's a good discussion of that in one of the Oprah interviews. And no is a complete sentence. If you say no to someone and then they kind of ignore that, then they're basically trying to control the situation. So the point here is that you can learn what criminologists know about what violence looks like before it happens. What do people do? And this is a pretty good start. So you can teach a child it's okay to communicate boundaries. If someone's too close to you, ask them to step back, please. Most people will. Oh, well, okay. Sorry. If you don't want to interact with someone, say no thanks, keep moving. And again, if you say no to someone and they don't want to hear it, then you know they're trying to control you. And this is how you want to start communicating this to your children. So now we're outside the home. We're going into other people's homes. There's a few rules here that you could start teaching to the child. You generally want to follow a person in rather than have them behind you. Because if you walk into a home and you don't feel safe, you want to walk back out. Just walk straight back out if something's wrong. But it's difficult to do that if the person is behind you. So you follow people in. And if generally you want to keep your shoes on if you can. I know sometimes culturally inappropriate, or at least have them right by the door where you can just grab them. Think about dogs and animals and just be really aware of what's going on, what's around that could hurt you. If you're going into a building, know how to get out. Don't get in an elevator if you don't want to. You don't have to. It's not a rule. Yeah. And if you're in the elevator, stand by the control panel because then you control the elevator. As you move around the world with your child, carry only what you need. You always want to have at least one hand free, maybe two. I like little backpacks. They became trendy, and that's good because now you have two hands free. You see a lot of people with a bag kind of on their arm, and they've got a coffee, and they've got a phone, and maybe they've got another bag, and that's kind of unsafe, isn't it? And out on the street, you want to project a very assertive posture, this sort of submissive posture. This picture worries me because this individual can't see what's around. And then, you see a lot of people just looking at their phones. And this isn't going to help us know what is around us. And look, these guys are crossing the road. So I see only this individual even looking up to get your head up and look around so that you're aware of what's going on. As you look around and think about other people, red flags include things like wearing inappropriate clothing for the weather. A lot of clothing, big coat on a hot day is a red flag. It might not mean anything, but it's a red flag. Repeated movements and malingering. Yeah, well, that's not good. And if you're switched on and you feel like the situation is unsafe, you should remove yourself. Parking lots can be especially interesting places that uh, police will tell you that they often have a lot of signs of criminal behavior. It can tell you a little bit about what's going on in that environment, especially after dark. So during the day, you might see evidence of drug paraphernalia. That might be a place to avoid after dark. It's this little subtopic is called situational awareness. And again, it's an awareness exercise that you can help your child get good at. Just to be aware of what's going on around you. And then just to finish up, when you go out and about in the car, especially in Minnesota, you want gas half full always. And get personal items out of sight, basically. If you're going into an area you don't know, you might want to take a look at Google Maps or similar before, just to get a sense, that mental map of the whole place. And a good place to be really on, like switched on, is intersections, because that's where a lot of behavior is going on that will just tells you a little bit about the type of potential situation you're getting into, and don't open the window for anyone. You don't need to open the window. If you don't feel like you should, don't. So we focused mainly on the home and the sense of safety and control and security that you could produce in the home, and then starting to go outside and teach kids about how to be safe out there too. I want to just end this session with just this going back to trauma. And I make no apology for repeating that lens in this training, because it's probably the hardest thing. Is there's nothing potentially that you can really do in any particular one day to make them feel secure or fully loved, but you do these little things and they add up over time. Because if there's really years of abuse and neglect, it's going to take many examples to change those patterns in their mind. But everything that you're doing with regard to what we've discussed here makes a difference. And so you just do your best, know that it's the right thing, and then you have to take care of yourself too. So we'll get to that a little later in our training. But those healthy routines are yours too, right? So I'm going to close it there.